Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. And it's Tuesday, which means it's time for, of course, our weekly tier list Tuesday. And I thought a fun topic this week would be looking at every single team's 2025-2026 expectations. Basically, what a successful season would be for these teams. This is not what I think that these teams are going to actually accomplish this year. But instead, at the end of the year, if they did this, you'd be like, that's an okay season. That's an acceptable season. That's a solid season. So let's get into it. I feel like that's pretty self-explanatory. Up first, we got the cup, win the cup, or at least make the cup finals, or bust. It's a failure of a season. Then win some rounds, make the playoffs, either make the first, second, or maybe even the conference finals. That's a solid season there. Make the playoffs, pretty straightforward. Be in the wild card hunt, not making the playoffs, but like the final 2 to 3 weeks, you maybe have an outside shot. You're like 5 to 6 points back and somewhat in the mix. And then we are probably going to stink. These are teams that were absolutely horrendous last year and might improve, but are still going to be far too far away from the playoffs, or teams that are kind of entering some kind of rebuild. So yeah, let's dive into it. All 32 teams. Colorado, although they haven't made a Western Conference Finals since 2022, I still think it's cup finals or bust. Cup finals or bust, I would say, for them, not winning the Stanley Cup. If they make the cup finals and don't get like swept, I think that's a solid season. But even making Western Conference Finals and losing, I think, would be a little bit disappointing considering the fact that they have Prime, McKinnon, Makar only has 2 years left at $9 million remaining. They need to go on a very deep Stanley Cup playoff run, or else it's a failure season. That's been the case. In 2023, you gave them some grace because they're coming off the Stanley Cup. 2024, that Dallas team was damn good. This year was a huge failure, and I think next year, if they lose to the Dallas Stars, Winnipeg Jets, Minnesota Wild in the Central Division, or even in the Western Conference Finals, it's a failure of a season. The Detroit Red Wings, pretty straightforward. Make the playoffs. If you make the playoffs, Steve Yzerman stays. If they miss the playoffs by a decent amount, he's probably gone. They didn't really do much to improve the team this year, but still, the expectation for this team with their internal growth is to make the goddamn playoffs for the first time since, 2015, 2016. The Anaheim Ducks, I'm going to go be in the wild card hunt. They took a big jump last year, but a lot of it was just because the goalie tandem was so goddamn good. So if they're an 85-point team, although that would only be a 5-point jump, if they're an 85-point team, but with much better underlying numbers, that's a solid season. So be somewhat in the wild card hunt and be playing important games basically come March and early April. The Pittsburgh Penguins, probably going to stink. Right now, I don't think that they're like a no-doubt bottom 3 team just because they haven't traded Rust, Raquel, or Carlson yet, but they should do that at some point this season or this offseason. And even without trading those guys, they're still probably going to be like an 80-point team just because of the age regression with their team, although Ville Koivunen and Rucker McGrody are 2 pretty exciting young players for them. Edmonton, no shit. This is just straight up win the Stanley Cup Finals or bust when looking at the fact in 2024. Made Game 7. Last year made Game 6. There's nothing that can justify a successful season outside of winning the Stanley Cup for the Edmonton Oilers at this point. The Washington Capitals, I'm going to go with win some rounds, even though last year they were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference Finals and won a round in the playoffs. I don't think that there's extremely, extremely high cup or bust expectations with this team. If they just prove that they're legit, have a 105-point season, and make the second round of the playoffs, I think that's another very successful season. And then they can kind of just look to the future with some of their young guys and hope that eventually in 2 to 3 years, they can get back to true contender status in the Eastern Conference. But yeah, Chicago, they're probably going to stink. They could take like a 15-point jump next year, considering they had 61 points and still be one of the worst teams in the entire NHL. They're going to be a funner team come next season, but are probably going to still be pretty goddamn bad. They didn't add this much. They're just relying on internal growth. Columbus make the playoffs, considering they were in the wild card hunt literally till the very end last season, kind of unexpectedly. Now there is some expectations, considering the fact that they're a young, exciting group. They brought in Charlie Coyle and Miles Wood this offseason. So yeah, they need to. It's not gonna be some huge failure like the rebuild is failing if they miss the playoffs next year. But the expectation is to make the playoffs, considering how magical last year's season was. They got to get better goaltending from Merzlikins, though. The Seattle Kraken, I think that they're probably going to stink, but the expectation is definitely to be in the wild card hunt, considering since that 2022 season, it has just been so underwhelming. They were 81 points, then 75 or 76 points last year. So yeah, they need to actually show some life, or else Ron Francis and Jason Botterill, which both of them somehow got promoted this offseason, should be out of jobs because it has just been bad the last 2 seasons. The Dallas Stars, definitely cup finals or bust. Actually, just winning the Stanley Cup. I think after making 3 Western Conference Finals, although they have not made the cup final, they did in 2020, but like this current core, more so of Wyatt Johnston, Jason Robertson, Thomas Harley, They got to win the Stanley Cup. I think even if they made the Cup Finals and went to 6 or 7 games, that would be slightly underwhelming. It would be a step, but I don't know at this point you would be like elated with that, considering they've been a high-level contender the last 3 seasons. The Los Angeles Kings, it's definitely to win some rounds, although I think at this point they're going to be battling for a playoff spot because they had such a bad offseason, considering the fact that they made the playoffs the last 4 years and have lost every single year in the first round to the Edmonton Oilers. Their expectations should be to win some rounds, considering this team is not really getting any younger with guys like Kopitar and Doughty. So yeah, they need to win some goddamn rounds. The Buffalo Sabres last year was so bad that I think if they just have like an 88-point season, I think their fans will see that as a positive step, getting back on track. Maybe it should be make the playoffs, but again, last year they were like a 78-point team and very bad. They just need to be competitive this season. I know overall the last 4 years have been a big fuck up basically since they've almost made the playoffs in 2023, but if they just get back on track and are sniffing the playoffs, considering how bad last year was, I think that would be a fine result. The Calgary Flames, although I don't expect them to make the playoffs, and I think for the betterment of their future, they should kind of stink next year, considering they just barely missed the playoffs last year. I feel like the expectation has to be to make the playoffs. Hope that Zane Parekh absolutely kills it this season. They're basically running back, for the most part, the exact same team. There's a funny graphic of like their additions and subtractions. It was like they lost Vladar, they got Prostostov, the guy from Colorado, the backup goaltender. So like they're running back the same team, and that team somehow almost made the playoffs last year. So I guess the expectations are to make the playoffs this season. Florida, it's cup/cup finals or bust. I think if they made the Eastern Conference Finals, you take that season, considering they made 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals. But yeah, when you run back the exact same team that was one of the best teams we have ever seen in the salary cap era, ever, point blank period, in the NHL, yeah, your expectations are to probably three-peat or at least make the Stanley Cup Final. The Minnesota Wild, after getting back, like this time last year was just to get back into the playoffs, check. They actually showed some life, and we're up 2-1 against the Vegas Golden Knights. So I think this season, with some internal growth, hopefully from Matt Boldy, hopefully if they re-sign Marco Rossi, Brock Faber, Zeev Boyum getting the jump, they should be making some noise come playoff time, even though the Central Division is absolutely loaded. The Philadelphia Flyers, I think getting Tocchet, bringing him in, hopefully Vladar can be a big upgrade considering their goaltending was so goddamn bad last year, where I think that the expectations, it's not going to be the end of the world if they don't do this, but I think Flyers fans want to see this team get back on track and play some winning hockey and at least being somewhat in the mix, considering Michkov looks like that future star. It's not like they're relying on getting a top 5 pick in 2026. They're bringing in Tocchet. He's not going to be some kind of long-term rebuilding coach. They are probably expecting to take a decent jump. The Montreal Canadiens, I feel like it's just make the playoffs just because last year was so magical at the end, not calling it fluky or anything. But I think if they just make the playoffs with 101 points, losing the first round, I think that's a solid season. Just getting safely into the playoffs. I'm not sure that they have these high expectations of winning some rounds. They're 2 to 3 years away from kind of entering their real contention window. Although they did get Noah Dobson, although they do have Demidov, I think last year was just far exceeding expectations that we shouldn't now just think that they're going to build completely on that and make the second round, make the conference final. So I think make the playoffs, but they definitely have higher expectations than these 3 teams for sure. I don't order the Rose. I don't know why I did that. I feel like people are now going to think that I'm ordering the Rose. That's not the case. The Carolina Hurricanes make the goddamn Cup final. Honestly, just winning the Stanley Cup, I think, is the expectation at this point. Not just the Cup final, although they've only won 1 Cup final game or conference final game since like 2009. Yeah, you bring in Keandre Miller, you bring in Nikolai Ehlers. You have so many young, exciting pieces. Go win the Stanley Cup, man. Get a freaking second line center first off. If they get their second line center, it's definitely cup, win the Cup or bust. I guess right now maybe it's just Cup finals or bust because they are so young. But yeah, they're definitely in that top tier. They have as much expectations as any team heading into next year outside of maybe Edmonton. The Nashville Predators, they sucked last year, but I feel like the expectation is kind of to make the playoffs. If Barry Trotz is not going to go down the route of a heavy retool/rebuild, you got to make the playoffs with this old-ass team of Roman Josi, Steven Stamkos, Marchessault, Ryan O'Reilly, Forsberg, and Saros like 30 and 31. So although I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs, I'm not saying that, the expectation should be if he continues, if he goes out and gets Nick Hague and gives him a 4-year deal at $5.5 million, like, you better make the playoffs, Barry Trotz, or else you're getting fired, unfortunately. Can you come back and be the New York Islanders head coach, please? That'd be awesome. The San Jose Sharks, I've been criticized for saying that they're going to be the worst team in the NHL next year. Again, they were a 52-point team last year. That is my logic. They're going to be much better, But if they take a 20-point jump, they're still probably going to be a bottom 3 team in the entire NHL. My New York Islanders, I think just being the wild card hunt, we lost Brock Nelson, traded him away at the deadline, got rid of Noah Dobson, traded him for 2 first-round picks that are not going to have an impact on the roster next season. So I think just be a fun team. I don't think you really have to be a good team in terms of expectations, but be a fun team offensively. Matthew Schaefer, be legit at the NHL level, and I think that's a solid season. I'm not sure. I honestly kind of don't want to make the playoffs, sneak in as a wild card, and get absolutely killed. Like, I want another top 12 pick. So I think that's kind of the expectation for most Islanders fans heading into next year. The Vegas Golden Knights, although they have only won one round in 2024 and 2025, I still think going out and getting a guy like Mitch Marner, that immediately gets you back into, you got to make the Cup Finals, even though they won the Stanley Cup 2 goddamn years ago. The expectations and pressure is just always on in Vegas, and next year is absolutely no different. The New York Rangers, although they had like 85 points last year, I think that the expectation is to win some rounds because, again, the expectations are always pretty high with the New York Rangers, especially the last 3 to 4 years. And their team is old as shit. Zibanejad, Panarin, Miller. These guys are not young by any means. You don't know when these guys might start to regress. So yeah, they got to win some rounds. Making the playoffs, getting in a wild card spot is not going to be satisfactory, and then losing to the Carolina Hurricanes or the Washington Capitals. They need to win some rounds. They need to show some big time life. The St. Louis Blues, it's tough. That Central Division is so goddamn good. You could maybe win some rounds, but if they just make the playoffs again, I think that's a very solid season for them. And especially some of their young guys continue to develop very good. Snuggerud, Dvorsky, hopefully at the NHL level next year. If Holloway and Broberg prove that they're legit, I think that's a solid season. I don't think that they have to beat the Minnesota Wild or Dallas Stars or Colorado Avalanche or Winnipeg Jets in the Central Division for that to be a successful season, considering they're kind of a decently young team at this point. So I think that just making the playoffs would be a pretty successful season. And similarly to Montreal, they needed some kind of like insane, a 12-game win streak to finish out the year to make the playoffs. Just prove that you're legit and make the playoffs next season. And that's a solid season. The Winnipeg Jets, I think it's Cup Finals / Cup or bust. Like, I know that might be bold considering they only made the second round of the playoffs, one time since 2018 or 2019. But this team is pretty goddamn old. Connor Hellebuck needs to step up and go on a deep playoff run. You don't know how many more cracks you're going to have with this current team. And when you are Winnipeg, it's not like the most attractive destination. So heading into next year, although they lost Nikolai Ehlers, expectations are going to be very high for a team that won the President's Trophy last year. And unlike Washington, does not have the young players and the prospects coming up within their pool where you can say maybe our time's in 2 to 3 years from now. The time is definitely now for the Winnipeg Jets, for the New Jersey Devils. You could maybe argue even Cup if they're fully healthy, Cup / Cup Finals. I'm going to go with win some rounds because they are still pretty young with some of their core pieces like Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, Jesper Bratt, and Luke Hughes. So yeah, get back on track, safely make the playoffs, beat either Carolina, Washington, or New York in the first round of the playoffs, and I think that's a decently successful season for the New Jersey Devils that should be a high-level team for the next 6 to 7 years for the most part. The Boston Bruins, I don't think that they're going to be a playoff team, but I think the expectation whenever Pastrnak is in the middle of his prime should be to make the playoffs. Like, they're too good to stink. I don't think they're going to have a similar impact as last year. They brought in guys like Tanner Jeannot, traded for Victor Arvidsson, so you better be trying to make the playoffs if you're giving that ice time to those guys in their late 20s, early 30s. So yeah, I think the expectation for them, they acted this summer like a team that could potentially be in the playoffs next season. Tampa Bay, again, they've lost in the first round, 3 straight years? I think the expectations are Cup / Cup Finals. They have no picks for the foreseeable future. Their prospect pool is pretty goddamn shit. They're relatively old at this point. So the expectations are to make a Cup Final, especially when you're Tampa Bay and you've won Stanley Cups recently. That's the culture there. That's the winning culture in Tampa Bay. I'd say Cup Final. If they make a Cup Final, it's a successful season. But yeah, expectations are high in Tampa Bay. For the Ottawa Senators, I'm just going to go with make the playoffs, similarly to Montreal put them together for this. Like, last year, they were a more consistent team than Montreal, but just making the playoffs yet again and establishing this rebuild is fully over, not falling back down to 87 points or something like that. I think that'd be a successful season. I think the season after that, they're definitely being win some rounds. They won't fully be in win the Cup or Cup Finals or bust, but just make the playoffs and maybe make it in the third Atlantic Division spot this year. Go for 101 points, but I don't think that they would have to beat the Titans in the Atlantic Division like the Tampa Bay Lightning, like the Florida Panthers. Toronto Maple Leafs, not really a Titan, but I don't think they would have to beat one of those teams for it to be a truly successful season. Toronto, I think I'm going to go with win some rounds. Theirs is definitely like if they make the Eastern Conference Finals a successful season after losing Mitch Marner. I think that they do have a little bit of grace considering the team is going to be a little bit different and you're going to have to adjust to that. But if they made the Eastern Conference Finals first year with Marner, I think you could say that's a positive. They're definitely the closest to Cup/Cup Finals or bust. Do not get me wrong. But yeah, if Matthew Nyes takes a huge step to make the Eastern Conference Finals, I think that'd be a pretty successful season for the Toronto Maple Leafs. And then the Vancouver Canucks make the playoffs, stay healthy for the love of God, and make the playoffs, and that's a successful season. You don't have to go full 2024 mode, win the Pacific Division, but if they're a 99-point team, Pedersen has 85 to 90 points, Thatcher Demko puts up a 912. That's a very successful season, even if they did lose in 5 games to the Edmonton Oilers or the Vegas Golden Knights. That's where I'm kind of at on the Vancouver Canucks, and then I got the 2 other old logos for those teams. But yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think about this? Again, this is based on how old their core is, based on what they've done in relative seasons, their future in terms of prospect pool and picks, what the expectations are for these teams heading into next season. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about that? I'll be seeing the next one, 2016 redraft, coming tomorrow. Peace.